welcome everybody. Feel free to interrupt and ask questions if you have any. I have no problem with that. I'm basically going to be talking about why I have basically devoted my life to FRC and why I think it's a very good program for students more than the other options that exist. There's so many, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. So first, who I am. I'm Allen Gregory. I've been involved in FIRST Robotics in some form for the past 15 years. 4 years as a student in high school, 5 years as a technical mentor on a team, and for the past 6 years I've been the head coach of FRC 3847 Spectrum at a St. Agnes Academy in Straight Jesuit. I've also been 10 years as a robotics volunteer, reffing high school robots, inspecting robots, all sorts of other roles for smaller competitions, running FLL events. I've pretty much done it all at some point, or seen it, or been a part of it in some way. And my undergrad degree is out of Rice, but most of my education comes from volunteering and things. We talked about actual robot stuff. Okay, so we're going to start kind of big picture and work our way down. So everybody here, because you're clearly at a Maker Faire, you get why STEM is important. Science, technology, engineering, math, I don't need to go over that. We know that we need more students doing it. We need more students who want to take a hard enough interest in it where they're going to study it in college. They're going to go into careers. We need more people innovating. We need all of those things. And there's a plethora of programs that you can choose from at your school, at your library, at whatever you're doing to potentially get students excited about it. And you have to somehow make a choice for what that is. What program are you going to do to get those students engaged? So some of the things you want to do, and most people agree that just doing lectures isn't the way to do it. If you sit there and talk to them about physics over and over again, you're not going to get the engagement that you want. You're not going to get the students excited. You're not going to get them to, you'll get some of them, but you're not going to get the ones who aren't already interested in it. So there's tons of project-based learning things you can do. There's solar car, drones, you can do invent teams, there's all sorts of projects, bridge building, science fairs, all of that is on the same path and hopefully is going to do the same type of thing and getting them excited about STEM, getting them moving in that direction to do it as a career. What we're going to talk about today is competitive robotics and kind of why I think that's the best program and why it's the one that I choose to put all of my time into. So worldwide, competitive robots are a big deal. They are all over the place. There are about 700,000 students in the world competing on robot teams every year, on 60,000 different teams, at 2,500 events or so around the world. So that's all the way from K through 12. So we have first graders building robots all the way to the robots you've seen downstairs, the big ones, the FRC robots, the main ones we're going to be talking about today. So something's working, right? Because clearly there's a lot of people doing this. It's been happening for a long time. The first educational robotics program was started in about 1992. We've been doing it ever since. And there's a ton of different options, even in this sphere. So a lot of these we have represented here today, actually. We have Vex Robots, Vex IQ. Not sure if there's any BEST downstairs, but there's quite a bit of BEST in our state and in our city. MATE is underwater robots. FLL is the first LEGO League for younger students. First Tech Challenge is kind of the bridge the gap between FLL and FRC. And the one we're going to talk about most today is the first robotics competition. That's the one that started all in 1992. It's the big program, it's the big robots, 150 pounds. And these are the ones that, to me, give the most benefit to the student. If you can build your program to this level, where you can have the resources and time and people dedicated enough to do it and build out the teams, you get the most benefit from it. And the benefits, or not necessarily you, but the students involved get the most benefit from it. We're going to be talking about a lot of those benefits and what they are for the program. So for those not interested, most of you have done FRC in some form, so this is going to be a review. But just for people who may not have. Teams of students and mentors. That's very key. It's not just teams of students, it's teams of students and mentors. We get a new challenge every single year. So brand new game, it's not a repeat, it's not something we've seen before. I've been doing it for 15 years, every year it's different. We've shot balls, like you've seen downstairs. If you go down there, we have robots shooting boulders into castles this year. We've shot frisbees, we've stacked totes, hung inner tubes. We've done a lot of things. Every year it's a completely different game. You must build a completely different robot. You can't just start from the robot you built last year. You can't just take that and build it again. Not how it works. You have to build a new one. You have some set of rules and regulations, but largely it's an open build. So whatever you can do, whatever resources you have, you can apply it to the robot. Competitions start at the end of February, and championship is at the end of April, roughly. So it's a very short time window too, right? The whole thing happens over 4 months. Every event has winners, and you have judged awards alongside that. So it's not just technical, it's not just who builds the best robot, there's a whole lot of stuff that goes into it outside of that as well. Now let's see how the technology is going to play with us to play a couple of videos. So to get you just a little bit introduced to it, if it will work. Maybe.
Welcome to the first robotics competition and the 2016 tournament challenge, First Stronghold. The Alliance quest is to breach the opponent's defenses, known as the Outer Works, weaken their tower with boulders, and capture it. There are more than 10,000 possible field configurations. The first 15 seconds of the match, the robots are autonomous and may earn points by reaching their opponent's outer works, crossing defenses, and scoring boulders in goals. Human drivers remotely control their robots. They retrieve boulders, overcome opponent defenses, and score boulders and goals from their opponent's courtyard. Robots may extend to reach the tower rungs and scale the tower for additional points. If an alliance captures their opponent's tower at the end of the match, their flag is raised and the alliance earns more points. The alliance with the highest score at the end of the match earns the win. This year's first robotics competition, First Stronghold.
3, 2, 1, go!
Into the autonomous mode. We have two very good scorers on both sides.
Finals. We see all three robots moving, but all right, we have 1296 going over the rock wall to collect some boulders off the center line. 5986 going into the secret passage to place some defense onto the Red Alliance. 1296 heading back over to score some more boulders, and 3005 going to score some low goals.
What a quick shot out of 1296, answered by 3481. Neither side is going to let up on their offense this match. They both want to take home this TRI banner right behind me. All right, 1296 runs back into the zone, but they're hit by a defender right before they shoot.
If Bel Air Robotics keeps that defense up, 1296 is going to have to change their game in order to get more protected shots. Meanwhile, RoboChargers is going to go for the low goal once more, losing the boulder after going over the moat. They're going to go for another boulder in the secret passageway, opting to keep the boulders in their side of the courtyard.
3481 struggling a little bit to collect a ball from the corner of the field, but once they get that, they'll be in their own courtyard right away. 1296 back in position. 3005 with a beautiful pick set up so 1296 can score.
Meanwhile, 3847 and 3481 looking to score some more boulders. 3847 scoring the low goal, while 3481 is getting munched by 5986.
That play you just saw 3005 make, they made that several times before. That's their signature defensive move.
It appears Bel Air Robotics' defense has paid off as they forced 1296 to go to the outer work shot, which is much harder than the shot that 1296 usually does. However, 1296 is going to show that they can do any shot from anywhere and almost score.
This match has a lot of defense being played, really slowing down both alliances. We saw them score very high numbers in the semifinals, but I would expect this finals match to be slightly lower scoring as 3481 heads back to the batter. With 20 seconds left, they go for a bit of an earlier climb.
Blue Alliance is using their extremely fast robots on their alliance to their advantage, gaining control, gaining a boulder advantage, and ensuring that they get the batter as well.
Scored for the Blue Alliance, but only about 3 or 4 for the
5,
Red Line.
4, 3, 2.
All right, so that's what a common match would look like. So that's what we're basically building towards. That's roughly what we're doing in FRC. Every year, brand new game, mentors and students come together, design and build a robot from scratch. Why is this better than the other STEM programs we do? Why is this better than Solar Car? All of those types of things. What everybody knows, robots is STEM, we already talked about that. It's hands-on, it's project learning, we already know that. It's multidisciplinary, right? So you're doing mechanical, electrical, programming, all of that gets wrapped into it. There's a lot of STEM projects that can do that too. What you don't know is that the importance of it is more the intangibles than the actual STEM knowledge. That's great, and it's useful, and I love when my kids learn about STEM too. That's part of it. We're clearly doing the teaching because we have to build the robot. But so much more, and the reason why there's so many mentors who give their time, dedication, and lives to this is because of what it does to the students. Okay, so we're going to go through quite a few things here, and kind of where I feel the most important, down to least important reasons of what you're getting out of this for the students. So one of the big things is it's inclusive. Everybody can do robotics. I've been doing it for 15 years. I've seen every sort of learning disability, physical disability, anything that you can do, you can still be a very productive member of your robotics team. At the FRC level, the only age restriction is somebody under 18 and a student has to be the robot drivers. Everybody else is welcome on the team. So we've had middle school teams do it. We've had middle schoolers. My high school team, one of the mentors had a 6-year-old son, and he was basically part of the team. He would file all of our parts for us. You can have anybody on the team. It does not matter. There's no part of your genetics is going to determine what you can do on the robot team. It doesn't even necessarily matter how smart you are or any of that. As long as you're willing to put in the work, you can be on the robotics team. You can do well. Not everybody's going to be an offensive end for the football team. Some of that takes being 6'3" and 250 pounds. Everybody can do that. Girls, boys, everybody can do robotics. And that's a big key to building a sustainable program and getting enough people into and excited about STEM. This is a really big key that people miss, and that's the amount of passion that gets transferred from the mentors and the volunteers, and everyone involved in it loves it. We're here and we're doing it constantly. We just spent all of yesterday bringing that field in to demo it, to show everybody that's here at Maker Faire, because we want more people involved. We want more people to see it. For many people, the team becomes more important than basically everything else they're doing at certain parts of the year, possibly all of the year. They've never felt that important about something than, instead of playing video games and things, they're making the choice to wake up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday and go volunteer somewhere to teach kids about robots. They're spending late nights and figuring out how to get their homework done and doing all of these things to make sure that their robot team is successful. I can't count the number of kids on my team who have, their parents are like, hey, you see my kid way more than I do. How are they doing? Because they're literally there that often. It lights the fire in them that hopefully will burn for the rest of their life through whatever they choose to either still be a mentor on teams and help students, or whether they choose to go into a career, they go to SpaceX, they go to wherever they're going to be, NASA, to keep doing STEM and to keep realizing that if they work hard and dedicate themselves to something, they can see the outcome at the end. Direct competition. So it's not science fair where, somebody wins, but you're not really competing against somebody else. This is head-to-head, every match. You put your robot on the field along with 5 others, and you're competing intensely to see who's the best. It's not just your robot. You can have a $10,000 robot, and the other person can have a robot that was built with wooden parts. But if they have the strategy for it, if they're playing better, if their robot's more reliable, there's so many things that go into a match. It's not just who's technically better. And it allows you to work harder, it allows you to iterate, it allows you to keep building and building and building. And you're judged based on that competition. And there's so many ways that you can play it, there's so many different strategies. All of those things go into getting students interested in it and getting them students competing. And competing is something we don't really think about all that often, but we need to have people competing. So a lot of people may not be the type who like sports. They may not be the ones who want to play sports or do that stuff. But learning to compete is extremely important. There's going to be competitions for scholarships. There's going to be competitions for placement into schools. All of those things are competitions, including most everyday life when you're competing for projects at work, all those types of things. Learning to compete, learning to put all your effort into it, learning to be passionate about things. Those are the types of things we want students to be able to do so that they're able to be successful in life. Mentors. Like I said at the beginning, FRC is relatively unique in this term. There's a couple others that do this too. But for the robot, it's not just students building it where mentors are teaching them how to do it. It's students and mentors working side by side to build the robot. There are countless times where my students are finding my mistakes or working together directly next to each other, CADing on the same computer, designing some part of the robot. Or I'll fix something for them or send it off to them for review to make sure that I'm doing whatever they thought was going to happen. Depending on what part of the robot is, they'll know it better than me half the time. And that's a really big part of it, because you end up learning to work like you do in your career, right? You're actually working, it's not just a school project. This is a product you're putting out. This is a machine that you're putting out along with a bunch of other people to do something that you all care deeply about. You're also getting role models that are real people. They're not celebrities, they're not athletes. They're people who work in the community, they're people who are working alongside you, and you know them not just as your teachers, not just as the people you're working with, but as friends. We have team bonding activities. I've ice skated and paintball and dodgeball and all sorts of stuff with my team. You get to know them personally. You talk about throughout shop time, all sorts of random conversations come up. You try to limit certain things, but you'll still have politics, religion, everything that you talk about with your family, you end up talking about with robots. And you're not always going to agree, but you learn to have that discourse. You learn to be respectful of everybody. And you learn how to interact with adults at that level. That's one of the big reasons why I still do this today, is because of the engineering mentors who were on my team while I was in high school, who I knew as friends, who made sure that we were getting the robot along well, but also talked to us about their hobbies or how their families were doing and how they went to school and what they did, and just kind of provided that guide and example for me. One of our mentors would invite us to their house to build sometimes if the school was closed. Like, they would do whatever they could to make sure that we were moving along on the project, getting everything done, along with as well-developed people as we could be. Teamwork. So I've already talked about this a little bit, but this is a big part of it as well. So instead of a science fair project where it might be yourself and a partner, FRC teams are big most of the time. Anywhere from 10 to 140 people. Average somewhere in the 25, 40 range, somewhere in there. And you can do it however, there's lots of different ways to do it. They all work, people can make them work in different ways. You can figure out what works for you. But the important part is you are working as a team, and that teamwork builds a lot into you and teaches you how to do a lot of different things that you're going to need later in life. And it's not just working with a few people, so you have to learn to find a way to get consensus across a large amount of people, right? So similar to what you'd be doing in a company as you're making company decisions, or your team at a company, you have to check off with different people to make sure everything's going to be okay. If you change one thing on the intake, does that change something on the drivetrain? All of those types of things have to be considered, and all the people that they're going to affect. And also just having to deal with 30 people, right? You're dealing with the frustrations and the arguments, and sometimes the anger, but also the joy and the fun and learning about different people's backgrounds, and all of those things happen when you're on a team with some people that big. You hopefully learn how to forgive each other, because you're not working with them for just a few weeks. You're working them for years at a time. Most of the time, if you're in the same grade with them, you might work with them for 4 years, 2, 3, whatever it is. Longer if you come back as an alumni. You know these people for a long time, and you have to learn how to deal with that type of relationship. Not only are you working with your own team, but you also build relationships and you learn to work with your friends and acquaintances on other teams. So most of the time you see the same 2 dozen teams at all the events we do. We demo with the same group of teams and a great group of students and mentors all the time. We compete with them, we practice with them. We know their students and their mentors pretty well. Then you learn to deal with those relationships, inter-team to team, the same way you would have like company-to-company relationships with partners that you work with. You learn to figure out if something you're going to do is affecting them, or who to ask to different demos, and all of that stuff plays into it. And you just build those types of skills of working with a team, working with team to team, all of those types of things happen. Strategy. This is one of the ones that I think most people who have ever seen FRC robots but have never been a part of a team don't understand that happens. this is probably one of the most important things to an FRC team that people just gloss entirely over. We spend a ton of time thinking about strategy in the same way that like NFL coaches think about their playbook. It's the first thing we do after kickoff is we don't look about what's our robot going to look like. That's not important yet. We're trying to figure out how we're going to play the game. And then once we know how we're going to play the game in terms of where do we get the most points, how do you get the most points, is defense going to be able to stop us from that strategy? How are we going to do something that defense can't stop us from doing? Right? Because again, like I said, it's direct competition. There's going to be people stopping you from trying to do what you want to do. So that big part of that is that initial strategy discussion of, okay, what are we going to build? And then we start designing it and figuring out how we're going to build it. But then even then, once we have our robot, we have to continue to do strategy, and we go all the way to the point where we're scouting too, which is also something that a lot of people miss. The majority of students at an FRG team, or most FRG teams, are doing the scouting part. You only need 6 or 8 working on the robot and drive team and all that. We'll have a dozen or so working on the scouting and strategy side at any event. They're keeping all the data on every robot at the event. So they're marking down every robot shooting percentage and where they like to shoot from and what their robot's abilities are, if the robots have any breakdowns or problems or how they're designed. We're doing all of that. We're taking photos. We're making sure that we know as much information at every robot in the event as possible so that we can have a strategy edge coming up in our next match, or we can know how to work with them if they're an alliance partner. We have to decide on the strategy for every single match. So before a match, the drive team from all the team from the three teams on the alliance will get together, and we basically have 2 to 5 minutes ish to decide how we're going to play a match against another team and give us the best chance of winning. So we have to all very quickly put out the information that we know. So we talk about what data do we have on the other team, what we know about the other teams, what we know about ourselves, what are all of our teams able to do, and then build a consensus of that at least 12 people or so and say, what is our match strategy going to be? How are we going to play this? Okay. Yeah, I think I'm good there. All right, so another big piece of FRC that's especially different than a lot of the other tournaments and a lot of the other competitions you can enter as a student or as any other way you could mentor or want to help students is first at its core, FRC at its core has a principle of service. They don't necessarily say that, they don't necessarily come out and tell you exactly what you're supposed to do about it, but in what they celebrate and what they highlight as an organization, they want their teams to be serving the community, to be getting more people interested in STEM, getting more people interested in making sure that our students are ready to go to college, ready to take on these new careers, ready to be excited about studying STEM in whatever ways we can do. And not only necessarily STEM service, but also just being good citizens and good stewards in our community for service. So as an FRC team, the highest award you can win in an event is called the Chairman's Award. That has nothing to do with how well your robot does on the field. Absolutely nothing. The judges who are judging that never even see your robot on the field. They don't take into consideration at all. Making noises. Okay. That highest award, the Chairman's Award, is given to the team who, in the judge's eye, basically best represents a role model for other teams to follow. Which teams would make the entire competition, the entire community better, their community better, all of those types of things. Which team would be the best role model that if every team followed and was like them, would the world be a better place? So service comes in a lot of forms in FRC. As a team that I mentor, we do things like construction, which we just had last week, where we design and build a sculpture of canned goods. We've donated 15,000 cans in the last 5 years to the Houston Food Bank. We go and work at the Houston Food Bank. We've worked at Urban Gardens. And it's part of our effort to deal with community hunger and things like that. A big part of our service comes into making sure that we're passing on the benefits and the opportunities that we've had to more students in the next generation. So we'll do, every summer we do a 2-week-long robotics camp that's completely free to underprivileged kids at a Boys and Girls Club. We do multiple camps for different programs like Girls Inc. and things like that, where they just want us to come in for a couple hours and teach their kids about robots. We try to work with other FRC teams. We open up our lab for building. We help each other as much as we can. Service is not only really optional at all, it is expected of an FRC team to do as much as you can to help all the other teams, to help at other events. We run and ref and organize events for younger students, both First Lego League for 4th through 8th graders, to VEX events for middle school and high schoolers. We do all of these things so that we're not just taking the stuff, right? The students on our team have to give back as much as they're getting from being on the team. There's somewhat of a sense of that obligation to do that, and hopefully part of that comes with them after they've left our team, right? The idea is that they'll still continue to be good members of their community, continue to do service, continue to do all those things. Novel. This is one of the things I think makes it very different from a lot of the other STEM programs. Sure, you can have a different science fair project every year, and that's fine, but it doesn't necessarily get the same group of dedicated and passionate mentors to come back year after year and do this same thing over and over again. Being a brand new game every year and making the challenge different and interesting and exciting keeps students, keeps alumni, keeps mentors ready to go and interested in what's coming. For this example, we know a little bit. We find out our game January 7th will be kickoff. We know that it's called Steamworks. That's all we know so far for the 2017 game. And there are NASA engineers and GM engineers and SpaceX engineers and all of these people who have, in theory, should have better things to be doing, are worried about what's coming January 7th. That's what they're getting excited about. These are the same people who are going to be working on putting robots and people on Mars, and they're excited about what's coming January 7th because of how novel it is. Because it's the same thing roughly, right? It's, for the last 12 years, it's been 3-on-3 robot things that are roughly the same size, but it's been an entirely different challenge every year. You're working with a new group of, you're working with at least a couple new students every year, right? You get a new freshman, you get a new students. Enough changes to where you don't get bored. Every year is a little bit different. Your team's a little bit different, the game's a little bit different. It doesn't get stale on you. And the other big step is you're always innovating and being creative. So every year, new products get released for the market. We have enough teams now where there's companies who release products directly for it. Someone else, right, we see every robot every year, so they're not like they're covered under blankets and under wraps or anything. We learn about what every team did the previous year, so everybody's iterating on top of all of the development from an entire season. So it pays to be new, it pays to be innovative. You can't just build the same thing, you can't basically rest on your world ever. You constantly have to be learning something new, learning the next new thing that'll make your robot better, make your team better. This goes into the backlog, some stuff I was just talking about. Creativity is very much celebrated in incremental increments in terms of maybe new gearbox design, something that can make your drivetrain a little bit better, but also in overall robot design. Some of the best robots every year are extremely creative. There might be, there's 3,500 teams roughly around the world. A lot of them are going to look kind of similar. They're going to have similar subsystems. Maybe it's a game where you have to shoot a ball, they're going to have a spinning wheel to shoot a ball. The ones that are really innovative when they've tackled the game in a very different way and can still make it successful. And those are often celebrated and very unique. So it drives that idea of how you can be creative. And that's what you're kind of, at the beginning of the season at least, we're all looking for what's that next creative thing, what's that next big thing. There have been some years where that has dominated the game because they were able to find a solution that was very different from everybody else. Okay. basically, for most of your projects that you have in school, on other STEM projects, you work hard on it. Eventually there's a deadline, or you eventually determine you're done, and you turn it in, and that's it, most of the time. That's not how robots are. We have 8 to 16 matches an event. We might go to 5 to 10 events in a year, including the off seasons or kind of like optional ones that we do after the championship's over. All of those are times where you need to be working on your robot to make it a little bit better. If your robot doesn't work quite well in the next match, you figure out why. You're working on new parts, you're working on fixes, whatever you can do to iterate your robot to make it better. The best teams are doing that throughout the building process too. We start with relatively simple prototypes of things. So we decide, oh, we need a intake to be able to suck a ball in off the ground. And we start with things powered by hand drills to be able to intake a ball. And then we iterate up a little bit from there, and we have it, now it has motors, and now but it's not quite, it's maybe made out of wood, something that we can make fast. And we figure out the new dimensions, the new priorities, all those different things that go into making a successful thing. You do it over time, and you do it by making the next version, the next version, the next version. Right? It's the same concept that led us to the Thomas Edison quote, I didn't fail. What it is, you got it? Go, go, go.
I didn't find it. I forget.
Well, see, you did the same thing I did. Now no one's going to know it. All right, so we'll ignore that and act like it didn't happen. I'll cut it out of the audio tape. Oh, you got it now?
Yeah. I didn't fail. I just found 99 incorrect ways to do it.
Yeah, that's paraphrasing it, but yeah, you're close. Because something about it didn't work, but yeah, you're right. Okay, so the basic idea is that the robot is never done. We're always finding a new way to iterate, and that's the same type of concept we're doing in real life. I don't think I've ever released a product the first time we made it, right? We're going 3 or 4 times before we get the right one, and even then we're still going to be making it better for the next run of production. Whatever it's going to be, we're going to keep iterating, finding new ways to make it work. Responsibility is a really big part of FRC teams. We're putting way more responsibility on the students than they even think about, because they have, depending on the situation, they might have 30, 40 people, mentors, parents, students, all expecting them to be able to do something and do it very good. The drivers of the robots have to make sure that they are trained and ready and awake and as much as they can be to drive that match, right? Because their performance does matter. It matters to everybody on the team. In the same way that a quarterback of a football team, their performance matters. So we're giving that goal to the drivers, but it's also not just the drivers. It's to every single scout on our team. If they get a team shooting percentage wrong, or they screw up their scouting sheet, that affects everybody else in a big way. We're all in it together, but we're all counting on everybody to perform at their role to make sure the team can be successful at the event. Along those same lines, there is an intense amount of pressure at these events. It is not cheap in terms of money to go to these things or to perform and build these robots. It's also not cheap in terms of resources, time, people, all of these things that go into it. So when you might have 5 minutes between finals 1 and finals 2, and your robot's intake's broken and you have to fix it, that's a lot of pressure, and that's a lot of pressure very quickly. So you're thinking quickly about what's the best way to have the solution. We're thinking ahead of time about how to be prepared for that situation, how to make our stuff easier to fix, how to make our stuff more reliable, all those things go on. We've been told at one point, we had a reporter next to our pit during one of our events, and she was like, wow, you guys just looked like it was a surgery room. Because we were literally we'd have students going 3/8 inch drill, whatever, and it was just getting handed to them as immediately as they could, because they're just in the robot constantly working, trying to get this thing fixed or built or whatever they were doing. People acting as the nurse at the time, and then switching out because their role was coming up in the part that they knew more about where they were doing it then. So there's a lot of pressure that happens, and the team learns to build that way. the same way that a pit crew on a NASCAR racing team would work. You also learn to operate on less sleep than you should probably be getting at some point, whether that's for reasonable reasons or because you just procrastinated and didn't sleep. But at events, no matter what, championship's a good example. The scheduled time of the event is from 7 a.m. to 8 or 9 p.m. Like we're going that whole time, and then we're still having to do the scouting meetings and things at night. You're lucky to be getting 4 or 5 hours after you may have been on a bus for 18 hours to drive to St. Louis. So they're learning to think clearly, learning how their body operates, learning where their limits are in a realm that, and in a thing that necessarily isn't necessarily critical. It's not life-threatening if for some reason you need to go take a nap. In fact, kids have to go do that, and we make it work. And they learn where their limits are, they learn how to operate at that level, and then they're better at it when they have to do it in college and they have to pull all-nighters for some project or something like that. Along the same lines of responsibility, you also get a very good introduction into leadership, even if you don't want it. You're often thrust into it because you're the best person on the team for that role. There's lots of different roles throughout the team where you end up taking on some of that leadership responsibility. It's not necessarily just the captain of the team who's managing everything. There's sub-teams throughout, so you may have a team that's in charge of programming or CAD or a certain mechanism or scouting or design or any of those things they can be in charge of. And they're working with younger students, they're doing some of the teaching, they're making sure that they stay on task. And you see that growth very distinctly from a freshman who walks on the team who may be joking around all the time to the senior who is stopping the freshman from joking around all the time and making them actually do the work. And you're not just leading your friends and your teammates, you have to be leading other alliances too. You have to be leading other team members on other teams. Most of the time, often by your senior year, we might have an alliance partner coming up in a few matches whose robot stopped driving. I'll just tell a kid, hey, go fix that. Go to their pit, figure out what their robot needs, and work with them to do it. And they'll step up and take leadership over 4 or 5 random kids they've never met before. But they identify the problem, work with them. It's the other kids' robots, so they know to ask, say, hey, I'm here to help, what can I do? I think this is the problem, how do we do it? And they walk through that with people that they have no real relationship with. But they learn that type of leadership ability from this program. They learn to motivate and critique their own teammates in terms of getting them to go to different events and things. Like I said, this doesn't always, the first people on the team, even I have kids downstairs, this is some of their first events here in the fall, we're still teaching them. They may not have wanted to spend their weekend demoing robots to little kids, but the senior leadership got them to do it. Communication. This is part of it at this event right here. We're teaching them how to talk to people about what we do, how to be in conversation with complete strangers, how to give public speeches and things. Part of it is going to be judging. So in the most clear-cut example, the Chairman's Award that I was talking about earlier, the highest award that FIRST has, you have to have 3 of your students go in front of a panel of judges and give a 5 to 7 minute presentation. That presentation pretty much is your entire submission for the award. There's a few other things, but if that doesn't go well, you're not going to get it. So it's rehearsed, it's videoed, and they're analyzing their own tape on it. They are learning to give that presentation just as well as any debater learns to do debate, or even actors give their performance for a play. They know that they have to get it right. They have all that responsibility, like we already talked about, from everything the team has been doing for years. They have to be the one to describe it to the judges. We've talked about teaching a little bit already, but this helps a lot in terms of what they're able to do when they get to college, when they're able to work with their teammates and partners and transfer knowledge from themselves or things that they've learned to other students. and they're learning it with a subject they care about. Like we were talking about, most of the time they start really caring about robots. So they're teaching the younger students on the team or new members. If they learned how to do all the pneumatics, plumbing last year, they learned what a regulator and cylinder and all those things were, they'll be the one to teach it to the next year students. They're also teaching groups of students robots who may just be younger students. So we go out and do it with 3rd, 4th, 5th graders at different programs, and they're having to teach them how to program robots. Students that they've never met before, they have no idea. They're going to lead them, teach them, keep them under control as much as you can. They're also teaching other members from other teams. So while in an alliance, we're helping other robots, or helping other robots, we're helping them fix things. We're teaching them tricks that we know, tips that we know, all of those things happen. And that transfer of knowledge, they learn to do that very well. This is another one that a lot of people miss if they just glance at FRC and see the robots. A ton of our time isn't spent on the robot. We've already talked about all the service that we do, but a lot of the other stuff we do is design and branding and producing press releases and materials that go out to other teams in terms of resources and all of that stuff. So we have multiple people on our team who have learned graphic design or website design and all of those things that roll into what makes a product better, not necessarily just the engineering side of it. Every team's logo has to be designed in some way. Some of it is the aesthetics of the actual robot, so figuring out how to best represent your team, your schools, your sponsors, how to get a message across with recruitment posters, how to present stuff to the judges again, how the best way to present information in a way that's understandable by people and memorable and all of those things. I think we're just about wrapping up too. One of the things that's somewhat limited to FRC in terms of robot competitions, some of the others you'll see this a little bit, but FRC, because of the scale, you end up getting a pretty good global exposure to a lot of new people and ideas that you may not have. Just in the past 5 years with my team, we've interacted with teams from Brazil, Israel, Mexico, Netherlands, Canada, China. That's all I got off the top of my head, but there's probably more. We have many of those teams come to our events, so they'll travel here. If we go to the World Championship, we'll have many teams from those countries around where we're having to work with them as alliance partners. Sometimes where there's a strong language barrier, they may have 1 or 2 people who know some English, maybe not at all. But you're learning to interact with them, you try to learn as much as you can from them. We also got the opportunity to take a few of my students and myself last summer, 2015, we got to go to China to teach some students about robots and prepare them to get into FRC. So we worked with them to build a robot and then competed with them at a scrimmage event in China. So they get a much bigger global exposure than they will with a lot of STEM programs that are just local. Okay, so that's a ton of stuff. How do you make that all add up? What does that add up to? The big idea of what FRC does that's special, and what robot competitions do that's special, is it's basically a microcosm for the real world. It's what we do in industry, it's what real engineering is like, all inclusive. You have people working on what amounts to human resources. We have people on our team who keep track of when everybody's in the lab and how much time they spend there. It takes the work of many to achieve one goal. That's what every organization, every company knows. It needs every single person there to be working hard, working on their tasks, getting things done for them to actually achieve whatever your goal is, whether it's profit, some sort of service, whatever you're doing. Real deadlines and real requirements, right? If your robot's not ready for a match, no one's waiting for you. That match starts without you or not, or whatever state your robot's in. You have a lot of real stress leading into that. They're learning to deal with that at a very high level. How much you need to know about any and all subjects within the entire realm of what we call robots, or all FRC robots, is basically just up to individual teams and individual students on those teams. Not everyone's going to know all the stuff about electrical, pneumatics, all the stuff that we can know. You have to decide as a student, what do you want to research? All of it's out there. Everybody who has internet access can get to tons of presentations on it, tons of work on it. They have to choose what they want to do. There's mentors who will help, there's other teams that will help, there's tons of resources about what you can do. But a lot of it is choice and opportunity. How you choose to spend your time, whether you're going to sit there and play video games all summer, or whether you're going to sit there and build and design a practice drivetrain. All of that matters. The main key is how you use your knowledge to solve the problem of the game, and then how you're able to actually implement and execute that, along with all of your teammates. Only one team actually gets the champion trophy at the, well, in reality, 3 teams, the way it first works. But the bigger goals are more important. Everyone sees that. So when we're at an event, even if it's the person that we're directly against, it can be entirely counterintuitive to our self-interest to help someone else at that moment. We will still help them, right? We've helped repair other robots who are against us in the finals before. Right? We've given them parts, loaned them batteries, whatever they need to do to make sure they were running at a high level, we've done. Because it's not just about who wins that match. It's about everything of all the students having the best experience possible, and all the students getting out there and hopefully being the ones who change the world someday. So in that case, that everyone else doing something that to make the students better, why I truly believe that FRC is critical and why it's extremely important, why I spent 15 years doing this, is because the people who come out of it, the students who come out of it, are better. They're better people than I've seen come out of the other STEM programs. If I'm going to work with somebody, I'd rather have them have been on an FRC team at some point in their life, because they get a lot of those things we were just talking about. They understand it. They leave the program more capable. They are able to do relatively simple tasks that you would think are simple, but they're able to do it well as 18-year-olds instead of as 28-year-olds. They're relatively well-rounded. They're going to be able to talk to you about a problem, or they're going to be able to talk to you about their product, or whatever they're doing, better than a lot of students who may not have had that opportunity. They're going to be dedicated and passionate about whatever they're working on. They're going to find something that they're passionate about, and they're going to put their all into it. They're also going to be respectful. They're going to have a view of society that allows them to understand that it's not just all about them, but there's a much bigger goal out there. They're going to be service-oriented, and they're going to want more for the world than just their own self-interest.